PlayStation has always had a strange relationship with platformers. They needed a really good one to compete with Nintendo's strong catalog of platforming titles, so they had Crash, Spyro, and Ape Escape. The PS2 was home to a lot of great platformers from Sony as well, but as time went on, they started to thin out. The PS3 had the brilliant Little Big Planet, but most of these companies that previously did platformers, they started to shift to photorealistic shooters and action games. It's not really often that we see Sony publish platformers anymore, and when they do, they're not particularly stellar. But from the ashes of what once was came something unexpected, a first-party VR platformer for the PlayStation 4. This game right here, Astro Rescue Mission. After neglecting the platforming genre for what seems like a decade now, with either underwhelming titles or just no titles at all, we finally have another good first-party platformer directly from Sony themselves. And while that seems like it should be a really big deal, I feel like this one is really slipping under the radar. It only came out back in October, and I'm not seeing anybody talk about it. Perhaps that can be attributed to the fact that you need the virtual reality headset to play the game, but with Sony recently boasting over 3 million units sold, I figured there'd be somebody out there playing this thing. If you're not familiar with the game, you may at least recognize the character on the box. This little robot dude, yeah, it's the characters from the Playroom. You know, that app for the PS4 that lets you interact with these virtual characters via the PlayStation 4 camera. It was just kind of like this little thing to show you what your fancy new camera and controller can do, a tech demo of sorts, you know, like the Wii Sports or the Nintendo Land, but on a much more diet scale. They actually made a VR version of the Playroom, which was also free to download. It had a handful of party games with asymmetrical multiplayer, one player using the headset and the other players controlling their characters on the TV screen with their controllers. Think Nintendo Land, but with the VR headset instead of the Wii U gamepad. But tucked away in this collection of party games was a single-player platformer minigame called Robots Rescue. When I saw it was a VR platformer, I expected to be jumping around in first person, like Jumping Flash or something, but to my surprise, it took a route closer to Moss, having you look at the character from a third-person perspective and tagging along with your controller that was tracked in 3D to activate mechanisms with a grappling hook. I remember being really impressed with this when I first played it. It had really interesting controller gimmicks that complemented the gameplay very well. And after it was over in just 10 short minutes, I found myself hoping they would make a full game out of it or something. And that's exactly what they did. When they announced this game, I was so happy to see that they were going to expand that brilliant little proof of concept into a full-fledged platformer game. But that's besides the point. It's been a long time since Sony has put out a really good first-party platformer title, and when this game came out, critics were pouring over it. I did not expect it to do this well critically. But who cares what they think, because they're all stupid and I'm the smart platformer man, and that's my sworn duty as a YouTube idiot to give it a proper look and let you guys know what I think of it. So yeah, why don't we strap in, give this a whirl, and see what it's all about. I'm actually pretty excited for this one, because like, that demo is pretty dope. Oh, that's a robot boy. Where are you going? The story is really simple. These little robots are cruising around space, having a good time, and then this dickhead alien dude comes out of nowhere and smashes up their ship, scattering the robots all throughout space. It's now up to you and Astrobot to rescue all of the lost robots and find the 5 ship pieces to repair your spaceship. Definitely reminds me of the plot of Pikmin, you know, except with 5 ship pieces instead of 30. You'll obtain one of these every time you finish a world. Each world has 4 stages and a boss fight. Once you've cleared all 5, you'll have your ship all back together, and then you can go get revenge and beat up the alien. So you jump into the first level and you're immediately floored by the virtual environment building itself around you. Astrobot pops out of your controller and points forward. I love how every level starts like this. You pop the little dude out of your controller. It's really cute. The controls are really simple. You only use the analog stick to move, X to jump, and square to attack. That's all there is to it. But you can also perform a hover move by pressing X in the air as well. It's a pretty unique take on it. While it slows your descent, it also projects a laser downwards into the ground. This doubles as something that makes it easier to orient yourself and tell where you're going to land, and also as an extra attack that can be used to take out enemies. I found myself using this one a lot for enemies with spikes because it's pretty easy to get hit by those things when you're trying to punch them. And yeah, that's all there is to it. A simple jump, a hover, and a simple attack. You'll use these moves to make your way to the end of a linear stage and hit the button and do a fun dance. The only core game mechanic here that really struck me as something creative was some of the stuff they do with water. You can equip Astrobot with a little life ring that'll make him float to the surface, and if you combine this with waves, you've got something pretty cool, especially when you're underwater and he's floating above you. But obviously, it's not just these core game mechanics that make the game interesting. Instead, it's all of the VR gimmicks. See, you're not just a camera, this perspective, you're looking, it's not a typical video game camera. You're an actual character that's tagging along for the ride, and there's a lot of little things here to remind you of that every now and then. This could be minor details like seeing your own shadow, but sometimes you'll find yourself physically involved in what's going on. You might smash your head into certain objects to break through them, or you might dodge projectiles that'll smear your vision. I love how natural this all feels too. If your screen gets filled with gunk, a simple shake of the head is all it takes to knock it all off. And that is really cool because the first time this happened to me, that was just my natural instinct. That is just how my body naturally reacted to it. Oh, this part here, this really caught me off guard. The game wanted me to blow on this dandelion puff, and I was thinking, like, I don't have a mic plugged in, how's it gonna know I'm blowing on it? And then I blew and it worked, and like for a moment it felt like magic. I remember when I was a little kid and the DS was brand new, I had a friend with the new WarioWare game, Touched it was, and there was a thing where you could have these wind chimes on screen, and I was tapping it and hitting the buttons, and I couldn't get anything to happen. But then he takes the DS from me and he goes, watch this, and he blows on the screen, and that's what does it. I thought it was amazing back then because I had no idea there was a mic built in. I had no idea what it was that was recognizing that kind of input. It's the same deal with the PlayStation headset. There's a microphone on it right here. The Playroom VR actually makes great use of this thing. The VR player's voice gets pitched up and it comes out of the character you're playing as.
I'm going to eat your ass!
But of course, the most important component of the VR integration is the controller gimmicks. The game will track your controller in 3D, so it'll be floating in front of you as you play. And while this seems a little bit pointless at first, it's not long before your controller gets equipped with one of several gadgets that you'll use with the touchpad. Of course, we've got the grappling hook from Robots Rescue in the VR Playroom. You can use this to create tight ropes to walk on, and you can even flick the controller upward to send Astrobot flying up into the air. The other gadgets range from a water pump to douse fires, a Gatling gun to knock out objects and enemies. This flashlight was really cool. The level is too dark to see anything, so you'll have to aim the controller around to light up your surroundings. There's invisible platforms you can unveil with it, and you can fire a burst of light to defeat these ghost enemy dudes. But my favorite gadget was easily the ninja stars. The first level where you get this thing is kinda cool, you get to use them to cut through webs and ropes and stuff, but it's not until the Japanese themed level where the game really realizes its full potential. Here you can throw these stars into the walls and they'll stick there, and you can then use them as platforms. And this gets really cool when there's scrolling walls and rotating walls. It's really challenging, multitasking moving Astrobot with your own physical coordination. The game's not going to have you physically moving around too much. It's definitely not super hot, but there is going to be a lot of peeking around corners and scanning your environment. The game's most comfortably played in an office chair, so I recommend using one if you can. This is another huge component of what makes this game so interesting. What would normally be a camera turn is a physical head movement. Like you notice something out of the corner of your eye and you peer down off a cliff to see a robot in need of rescue. It feels very involving in a way that just isn't really possible without VR. Mind you, the player can actually see quite a bit more than what you're seeing on screen here. The social screen output crops the top and bottom, and it only accommodates for one of your two eyes, so the peripheral vision unfortunately just is not properly conveyed in this footage. So I guess you're just gonna have to kinda take my word for it. You really feel like you are in this environment. I mean, it's virtual reality after all, I don't really think it needs too much explaining, but the sense of your own physical presence in that world, it not only enhances how this game plays, but also how it feels. Like I said before, you're not just a camera, you're a real character following Astrobot, and the game has a lot of ways of acknowledging that, but not just in how you interact with the game, but also in how the game interacts with you. Astrobot makes eye contact with you. He'll wave at you. Oh my god, like, I'm not gonna lie, I sometimes found it hard not waving back. I know that's kind of lame, but like, I felt this bizarre connection to this dumb little robot dude that I normally don't when playing a game like this. There's a sensation you get when you're physically interacting with this little dude in VR that you just could not get from staring at a rectangle on the wall, you know? The way your controller movements can influence him, whether you're bonking him away at the level select screen or you're having him get stuck to your face in a water level. It is unbelievably endearing. This is like the most adorable game I've ever played. The soundtrack really elevates that feeling too. It's kind of like a more sci-fi sounding Katamari almost. There's brilliant attention to detail in every little corner. The robots you rescue as you progress through each stage, most of them actually have unique animations or situations they've somehow found themselves in.
He's hiding in the popcorn. What are you doing in there?
And the way they zip through the air and they pop into your controller, and like for a little moment you can see how many you've got so far in that level, and they all wave to you and then they pop back in, like, ah, man, it is overwhelmingly delightful. There are 8 of these little guys in every level. You'll be able to hear them crying for help when they're nearby, so keep an ear out for them. These guys can be placed at the end of a simple platforming challenge, or tucked around corners or on out-of-the-way ledges. Sometimes they're completely hidden away behind objects that you'll have to break, sometimes by using a gadget. Like any collectathon, you'll have to have a certain amount of these guys before it lets you face the world's boss, but every time I got to one, I always had way more than I needed, so as long as you're getting these guys when you see them, you won't have to worry about it. The boss fights are actually one of the game's highlights, I'd say, which is kind of uncommon in platformers. Like, there are platformer games with solid boss fights, but I never really consider it a high point of the game. But here, like, oh my god, these boss fights are really good. Each one has you using a different gadget. It's actually a pretty standard boss formula, you know, like you dodge the attack phase and you land a hit, and that usually involves a light element of puzzle solving, but it is so refined and polished, and the boss's movements are grand and bombastic, and everything is so well telegraphed, but it also manages to still be challenging. The bird boss was easily my favorite one. Once his beak is stuck in the ground, you'll grapple onto his goggles and give him some black eyes. And man, I tell you, the sense of scale here is absolutely phenomenal. You spend most of the game feeling so big in comparison to your little buddy down on the ground down there, but then there's these set pieces and characters that just tower over you, and then you feel small. I really can't do it justice by just showing footage of it because, well, firstly, like, there's a little bit more peripheral vision this way than what you're seeing in the footage I've been showing in this review so far. But the other thing is, like, it's one thing to see footage of this game on screen, but it's a whole different thing to be strapped in and you really feel like you're there, and these things just tower hundreds of feet over you. It's like, wow! It is just unreal, man. Also hidden in the stages, we've got these little chameleon guys. To collect them, you just need to look in their direction for a number of seconds, and that sounds easy, yeah, but they're so tucked away and really blend in that they can be pretty tough to find sometimes. And come to think of it, Rayman 3 actually had a really similar thing. There's one of these guys in every level, and finding him will unlock a challenge stage. These are mostly time trials that have you getting to the end of a short course within a certain amount of time, but sometimes there's gadget challenges and refights with the bosses where you'll try not to get hit. There's 2 extra robots you can get in these, a silver one and a gold one, each one being a reward for performing to a certain degree. I love how the gold and silver robots keep their unique colors when you look at them in the Horde. Yeah, that's actually another little side thing you can do. You go in your spaceship and you have a big old party with all the robots you've collected so far. There's also a crane machine in here where you can spend all your coins on getting capsules and stuff. These are little set pieces that form a diorama themed after one of several stage types. You can hop around them and bust up some enemies and stuff. There's no real goal or purpose to them, but it is a nice little side thing that will give completionists something to do. But yeah, I guess that's all I really had to say about Astrobot. At its core, it is pretty basic in how it actually plays, but it becomes so layered when they introduce all of these VR components. It definitely boasts that first-party quality too. Everything here is incredibly polished, from the consistently good level design to the beautiful visuals and the brilliant use of scale, player involvement, and physical interactivity. Everything about this game just paints a smile on my face. You can tell the people who made it really do love and care about platformers. The game is chock full of homages to other platforming games. There's the obvious stuff like the Donkey Kong Country-styled minecart sequence and how Astrobot borrows Mario's iconic jumping animation, but then we've got subtler stuff like the death animation from Rayman Origins. Like, look at that, that is one-to-one. You can't tell me that's a coincidence. That's totally intentional. This game is extremely good. It's not just a great platformer title, but it also makes very good use of VR. In what seems to be just a sea of half-baked puzzle games and rail shooter after rail shooter on the PlayStation Store right now, Astrobot shows us a really creative and different way you can use VR, and I really hope other VR developers will follow suit. Now, there are a couple of things I would like to criticize. For starters, the soundtrack can get pretty repetitive. While it is super duper good, there's just not very many songs in it, so you are going to be hearing the same ones over and over. This one's also pretty subjective, but I would also like to criticize how rudimentary and straightforward the mechanics and level design are. It's very much like Mario 3D World in that every stage is simple and linear, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, it just personally doesn't speak to me as much as more open-ended level design. But again, it's the game's VR integration that adds so many layers to this simple design, so even if you're somebody like me that vastly prefers more open-ended level design in platformer games, it's gonna be pretty hard to even think about that. This thing is just really well polished. There's plenty of clever ways to mitigate any comfort or perspective issues, things like the before-mentioned hover lasers to help orient yourself, a directional icon that appears if you lose track of Astrobot, and the controller turning transparent when it's in the way of your view. It really seems like they thought of everything, and I really appreciate that. These were all issues I was actively looking for, as somebody that has a lot of experience playing VR games, and I was glad to know that it seemed like they knew what they were doing. The only real glaring issue I ran into was that sometimes the controller's gyro would get out of sync, so the controller would be tilted not the same way that I was holding it, but that only happened a couple of times, and each time it did, restarting the controller fixed it. If you've got a PSVR, this is a must-play. I'd easily say it's the first thing that's exclusive to PSVR that has really blown me away. If you've been on the fence for PSVR for a while, this is a really good one to make the thing worth buying, I'd say, and I hope Sony will only continue making more and more fantastic games exclusive to this platform. My only major criticism of the game is that there's no support for PlayStation Move controllers, so you can't hug the robots, and that is a tragedy, man. But no, for real, like, this game is just a joy to play through. It has easily been one of the most pleasant surprises of the year. Like, if you have a PlayStation VR and you don't buy this game, you should go to jail! Yo, thank you so much for watching this video, man. Appreciate that. I have a Patreon if you want to pay me like $1 a month and get like my dumb podcast that I do with Brady. Also, there's another video right here on the screen if you want to watch another platformer thing. You can also follow me on Twitter, I guess. I'm running out of time with the sentence slate. Goodbye.